Hi. A few months ago, I had the pleasure of listening to a podcast of my favorite intellectuals, Sam Harris and the philosopher Daniel Dennett, both very smart people. In this video, I would like to discuss the topic of free will, which is what Sam and Daniel talked about in the podcast. This is also an open letter, or better, an open video directed at Professor Daniel Dennett. I'll try to contact him, and for the slight chance that he will actually answer and gives me permission to publish it, I will do so on this channel. So, Daniel, I hope it's alright if I just call you Daniel. You're a naturalist. You agree that nothing that ever happens contradicts the laws of nature. If we look at a scene at a bar, somebody punches another guy because he accidentally spilled beer over his shoe. Now, what happened here? We first might describe it this way. The guy got angry, thought about controlling himself, but selfishly decided it would be more satisfying for him to punch the other guy. But please comment on the following idea of how the world might function. When somebody spilled beer over his shoe, photons were hitting his retina accordingly, the impulses were transferred into neurons firing, and a complicated chain reaction was triggered in the already running system of his brain. As a side effect, consciousness arose, and the images of what happened appeared in his consciousness, but the chain reaction wasn't stopped or altered in any way. Next, the neurons firing caused the side effect of him feeling angry, but again, the chain reaction wasn't stopped or altered in any way. If we look at every single part of the nervous system and check if every atom and molecule and cell behaves exactly like it has to, I think it does. Gravity does exactly what it did before. The weak nuclear force, the electromagnetic force, and the strong nuclear force do exactly what they did before. Nothing that has influence on the physical world was added through his experiences. Next, the neurons firing caused the side effect of him having the experience of struggling with the decision to constrain himself and then deciding to punch the guy. Again, these experiences were just side effects that didn't stop or alter the chain reaction that led to his fist rushing forward, even though he felt like the author of his action. We can look at the chain reaction like it was a computer calculating something, but to be exact, the mass of his body was arranged in a way that photons hitting his retina in a specific way led to him punching another guy a few seconds later just because of the laws of nature. Do you think this assumption is factually wrong? Do you think it's unlikely? Or do you say it's still consistent with your view? Let's look at the practical implications for a second. The guy later stands in front of a judge and says, "Your Honor, I don't have free will, I'm just terribly unlucky, please let me go." But a reasonable judge can answer, "Unlucky? Yes, so was the poor guy that got hit." And the judge continues and says, "The universe somehow made your brain into a terrible information processing system because its output leads to the suffering of other people, so it's reasonable to lock you up. At least if this kind of thing didn't happen the first time. Other people can be protected this way, and in prison your brain might analyze the situation and change into something more reasonable. If you think it's rational to let all criminals go and let them cause more suffering, that only confirms how messed up your brain is right now." The judge can also look at the audience and state, "By the way, if anybody's watching this lawsuit is thinking to himself, well, if I don't have free will, from now on I can do whatever I feel like because I'm not responsible for my actions, I can tell you that if your brain is smart enough to understand that you might not have free will, then it is smart enough to understand what fairness is, and that the only thing that matters in this universe are the perceptions of sentient entities. If you don't have a brain of a psychopath, you have a conscience, and you know that these things are true and important. And everybody's going to hold you responsible anyway. So even though I understand you worrying that it could be harmful to just tell people that they don't have free will, you can always add important information like the judge did, and I think there are definitely also benefits that come with this view. Otherwise I wouldn't have made this video. I think the benefits are what Sam already mentioned. It might be natural to hate someone, but if a person believes in this view, I think he'd agree that it is not rational. And if we look at a few crises in this world, it might be useful if everybody thought that it was completely understandable how everybody acted so far and how we got into the state that we're in right now, and it might open the door for more pragmatic thinking if the feeling of hatred gets dialed down by this view, a view that I think can operate unifying. I'll get back to the practical implications later. Now I would like to look into some points you were discussing with Sam. At one point you said, I'm starting the quote, "As a sailor, I can't control the properties of the water, I can't control the wind, but I can control the boat. Your argument is trying to remove the very idea of control from the world. Nobody is ever controlling anything, not really, and I think that's a reductio ad absurdum. Of course we control things." End of quote. I left out a few sentences you said there. Yes, I think Sam's argument really wants to remove the very idea of control from the world in the sense that somebody is the true initializer of something. Someone who disagrees might now say, "Look, I'm really controlling things. I'll prove it to you. I'm going to raise my right arm right now. See? I'm raising it. I'm controlling it." But I would answer, well, what I'm suggesting here is that sound waves of what I said arrived at your ears, they were transferred into neurons firing, and the chain reaction of neurons firing determined your behavior. Billions of neurons were on some level processing information, including the information that you're a human, someone who wants to prove a point, and that you would raise your arm, and as a side effect, the thought appeared in your mind, I'm going to raise my arm to prove my point. But the thought was kind of irrelevant. The universe was doing fine without thoughts for billions of years. I think it handles matter like it always did. You raised your arm because of the laws of nature. Daniel, can you comment on the statement that every moment of our lives might be like that? If we look deep and closely, there's only one initializer. The universe is how it is, and it is the one and only and final player, and it doesn't share its power. I'll look into the alternative that thoughts influence the physical world later, but I'm pretty sure that you don't like the idea of a dualistic worldview, and you like the idea that thoughts override how the laws of nature normally handle matter even less. You say you agree with naturalism, and then I think you would look at the scene in the bar that I described and say he should have known better, he should have looked into his heart. Is that correct? As an advice for him, that sounds good. He doesn't need the complicated stuff. It's not important that it is 100% technically correct. It's important that he understands it and that it is useful. But if we tried to describe exactly how the world might function, I would say, whoa, wait a second. Photons hit his retina, the impulses were transferred into neurons firing, and a complicated chain reaction determined his behavior through the laws of nature. Tell me where the mistake is. If you agree that he can't control a neuron, or a group of neurons, or the impulse that is sent from his neurons to his arm, or his arm that is controlled by the impulse, if you cannot control his brain, or his body, or any part of the system, or his personality that is determined by his brain, then I think it's illegitimate to say that he has any control over the system without giving a reason why it isn't inconsistent with what we believe to be true about the micro level and the laws of nature. I hope you don't feel misrepresented by what I'm saying. I'm just trying to figure out where we might disagree and why, and where there's only a misunderstanding. I would like to look at the practical implications for a little bit more. I want to pick up the example of a football game you mentioned. If somebody makes a brutal fall and gets a red card, I think he should take punishment gracefully. What kind of world does he want to live in? If he tries to argue that he shouldn't get the red card because he didn't have free will, I think he's clearly going to lose. No one deserves to suffer, and if we want to come close to that state, we need rules. Rules for protecting players from brutal fouls, and fans from feeling betrayed because they understand the rules and agree with the concept. So rules and the enforcement of rules are justified. The player who gets the red card may be suffering because he gets the red card, but we're doing our best to keep the suffering for everybody as low as possible. But isn't accepting determinism doing something to the general understanding of blame? If somebody is mean to you, you're going to hold him responsible because you have to protect yourself from further damage and because you need him to change his behavior. But I think every rational reason we can come up with is practical, even if we count the reason that it is satisfying to hold a grudge as rational reason. But can you ever say that somebody really deserves punishment, even if he's the last living creature in the universe, because he really controlled his behavior? If this is what you think, please take me to the moment in which he behaved blameworthy and tell me exactly what happened at the micro level in that moment and how it leaves any room for control in the sense of being the true initializer. I want to take a look at the relationship between the first-person experience and the physical world again. I'm interested in looking at every model that is in itself consistent. Now let's think about the idea that, for example, the first-person experience of deciding something does have influence on the physical world. We have first-person experiences because of what is happening in our brains, right? If supporters of the idea of libertarian free will agree so far, and I think they should, I would like them to present a hypothesis of how the experience of making a decision relates to what happens next in the physical world. If they suggest that this decision-making process or the agent in which it appears has some kind of soul which influences what happens next in the physical world, I would be skeptical, but I don't think we should be too dismissive. Let's just say the universe just functions in a way where this kind of decision-making process knows which atom to influence or how to change a probability density of an electron. Sounds weird, but in quantum theory there are also happening things that sound weird. But now Sam might mention that in experiments we can predict what people will decide by scanning their brains before they decide it. Maybe it's hard for a test person to execute this test correctly, but if the test results are correct, I think the idea of libertarian free will looks bad. I think the other possibility is what I already mentioned. The experience of making a decision is a side effect, and without this side effect everything would happen exactly the same way. If the movement of any atom at any time can be completely and exactly explained by the forces of nature, no matter if the atom is inside the sun, or inside your brain, or inside your arm, then I think someone's claim that his first-person experience of making a decision influenced the movement of his arm hasn't really more credibility than the claim that it influenced the movement of an atom in the sun. If the laws of nature stayed the same, but the first-person experiences would disappear from the universe, how would the world continue? Well, next year there would probably be a championship boxing match. The fighters would evade punches, even though they would have no fear of getting hit. Millions of people would watch it, even though no one would feel the desire to watch it. After the fight, the winner might even say that he was scared after he got hit, and he felt the pain, but when the sound of the crowd cheering for him appeared in his consciousness, he fought even harder, even though these experiences never happened. The extremely complex network of billions of neurons firing on some level process the information that the mass of the fighter is a person that has goals, and in the world we live in, there actually appears consciousness through that brain, and the goals arise in that consciousness, but to me it seems that it's probably just a side effect. I think it's important that we think about why and when perceptions are felt in this world, because, for example, if we conclude that it might be reasonable that a system that is complex and intelligent and processes information about itself becomes sentient, we have the responsibility to be careful while developing AI. Well, we are not responsible in the sense that we have free will, but you know what I mean. I really have to come to an end here. Daniel, if you listen to the whole thing, I'm very grateful. Thank you.